Now, Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon.
We are speaking with the one and only Ric Browde, or Browde, producer, author, and of course now in charge of a dog rescue. And as we say here in Montreal, bonjour Ric, comment allez-vous? How are you?
Merci bien.
Merci bien.
Okay.
Yes. Bien correct. Boy, there's so much that I want to talk about because you've produced so many of the albums in the 80s that meant a lot to the scene and meant a lot to the people, from Jetboy, Kills for Thrills, Poison's Look What the Cat Dragged In, Faster Pussycat's debut, etc., etc., etc. But let me get into the dog rescue first. We got Wings of Rescue, which you can go to wingsofrescue.org. Talk to me, if you want, about that lifestyle change where you go from you're in business, you're doing the stuff with Ted Nugent, you're doing the stuff with all these other people, and then all of a sudden you move on to being an author and you go, hey, you know what? I'm going to take care of dogs. And I have great respect for that because I have a rescue right here in my lap and I have another one right at arm's length on a pillow right there. Talk to me about wingsofrescue.org.
Well, what Wings of Rescue is, we're not really confined only to dogs. We take all pets,
Okay.
Cats, rabbits, miniature horses, guinea pigs,
Gotcha.
potbelly pigs. We've done quite a bit. We fly pets from disaster areas and overcrowded shelters where they might be euthanized to safe havens where there's empty kennel space and where no local shelter pets are displaced by our.
So you're a no-kill shelter then?
We're not a shelter.
You're not a
we don't shelter. We have no fosters or kennels of our own. So we're flying to no-kill shelters, but no-kill has been perverted so much in today's vernacular because shelters claim that if they have a 90% live release rate, they're no-kill, which is to me like saying I'm a vegetarian and only eat meat on the weekends. To explain to the 10% that you killed that you're no-kill. But we also deliver humanitarian aid to disaster victims, both humanitarian and veterinarian. For instance, a few weeks ago, I was in Haiti delivering 2 tons of mobile hospital for the earthquake victims of Haiti.
Wow.
St. Vincent with the volcano. Every hurricane we've responded to. Basically, we've responded to earthquakes, fires, tornadoes, volcanoes, floods, freeze-outs, basically every American disaster except for the Trump White House we've been to.
Yeah, because we're in Canada, up in Vancouver right now. We're going through historic flooding. So is that something that your organization at some point might be called to, or you might want to take action and say, hey, we got to go help our brothers? You already have.
We're going to be in Vancouver on Tuesday, flying to Calgary.
Oh, wow. And so talk to me about what compelled you to do this. I mean, other than being a decent human being, because we should all be helping each other, you're in the business. You got rock and roll, sex, drugs, rock and roll, Ted Nugent. You got the whole thing. Why did you step away, or how did you just say, you know what? Not for me anymore. I got a bigger calling.
One day I woke up, and I remember the day vividly. My wife and I just were looking at all the records we've done, and I sold 29 million albums and all, and we looked at it and said, we've done nothing to make the world better in our lives. And we wanted to do something that gave back. I mean, doing another Poison album does nothing to make the world better.
Right.
And so we had both had a tremendous affinity towards pets, and we were awakening, my wife actually before then, that pets were being euthanized in shelters for want of homes. And it made no sense to us that was happening. So this was in 2003, and we both sort of devoted quite a bit of energy into doing that, and it became a full-time thing in 2008 for me.
That's incredible. And in terms of future goals with this, do you want to get to a point where you're a shelter and you have, or do you just want to be more of,
I want to be the Maytag repairman. I want to work at all. I'd like to see the world get better and humane. But in this day and age, I mean, you're lucky because you live in Montreal, and you've got very educated people by and large. I mean, maybe not so much. I used to live in Sherbrooke and can not speak.
You lived in Sherbrooke?
I did.
Oh
And
well. Well, see,
okay.
I'm not exactly in Montreal. I'm on the outskirts. I'm about 40 kilometers out, closer to the Ontario border. But if you say where I'm from, people go, I've never heard of it.
I
But
probably have.
yeah, you
I played
probably
junior
have.
hockey all over that area. So, but it's just you live in a more humane country than the United States. Unfortunately, the United States is basically bisected north and south, and the further south you go, the less humane it becomes. And Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, uh, Arkansas, those states in particular are always hard hit by shelter overcrowding and people not vaccinating or spay neutering their pets.
Yeah, I mean, the in the warm climates, it's hard because there's just so many animals and so much going on. If I can, let me just quickly ask you about some of the albums you worked on because I recently spoke to Ted Nugent and Tom Werman, but you worked on Intensities in 10 Cities, a show in Montreal that I actually went to as a kid.
Wow.
Yeah, back in I guess it
I
was
remember
80.
that day vividly.
Yeah, it was back in 81, I guess it was, right?
It was in December of 81.
Yep, I was there. Listen, I'll never forget the bow and arrow and the swing in the and I was like, "What the hell is this?" Because I at that point I had seen Kiss and Cheap Trick, so seeing Ted was a much different experience. How did talk to me about recording that and being involved in that because it is 10 different cities. So how do you sort of choose which song came from where and how did you just record the whole show or
Yeah, we recorded, I think we recorded 10 shows basically in all and took the best and then overdubbed on top of it. Just like Double Live Gonzo, which I was also involved in. I was
yeah.
involved in pretty much all those albums, but not getting credit on them. But and you're doing a lot of overdub. Basically, the only thing that's live half the time is the drums. I mean, it's just marketing.
Yeah, it really is. I remember interviewing a guitarist for a band back in the early 80s or early 1990s. And he said, "We're about to go record our new live album." And I went, "Great. What town?" He goes, "Oh, no, we're going to a studio in Hollywood." And I went, "What? What?"
Yeah, I mean, the crowd noise was probably from the concert of Bangladesh. It's just like there's so many things going on in live albums. I met my wife during the recording of Double Live Gonzo, and I just remember she was a Columbia Law student. And we've been married now for 43 years, but I brought her in to see, and she goes, "Why are you in the studio if you're doing a live album? What is everybody doing here?"
Oh, well,
Broad exposed.
it's and I'll finish on this with the live stuff. I was Aldo Nova lives about 10 minutes from me. So I was at Aldo's house in August last summer, and we go into one of the studio rooms because this entire house is studios. The only thing that's not a studio is the bedroom, the kitchen, and the bathroom. Everything else, he's turned into different studio rooms. So we're in one room, and he goes, "Oh, this is the room in which which Obie O'Brien and Richie Sambora recorded their parts for the Bon Jovi live album." And I went, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, all the guitars were done right here in my living room." And it's like,
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, it's a magic. I mean, especially now. I mean, you don't need a recording studio at all. Back in the day when I was recording, you actually had to pay for a studio that would run anywhere up to like 200 US dollars an hour.
wow.
Now kids with their beginning computer have more at their fingertips than I ever had paying $200 an hour.
Yeah, I know, and you just look at the new iPhone that's coming out. It has a 1 terabyte of memory, and I'm like, wow, you can put a terabyte in your pocket. Just imagine
Yeah, just imagine, when
where
Apollo
we.
noon, your Commodore computer was more powerful than what they use. So it's pretty impressive.
Um, Ted Nugent and I get along. I'm not. I'll stop at saying we're friends, but we get along. Politically, we might be different. What was it like back then working with Ted? Because
We just
personally, he's
liked
been, yeah.
we just liked each other immensely the
Did
entire
you
time.
really?
Everybody hated him. Yeah.
And so he gave everything to over to Lou Futterman and said, Lou, just I can't take this guy.
Well, Lou was just a real estate developer basically at that time.
Right.
And he was lost interest. And I was his assistant, and I ended up doing. Anytime you saw Lou's name, really it was pretty much me doing things. Ted Ted had his own right wing gun toting philosophy,
Right.
and I'm basically the opposite. So he and I we were never a match. I mean, we disliked each other immensely. I was doing it just to do albums because I wanted to do albums, but it was certainly not for either the music or for the person.
For the person. So how did you get into producing initially? I mean, you had your Ric Browde production thing. You had started working on a Wasp album, and then you got called away.
Well, I mean, Ted came first. I was going to university at Cornell,
right,
and Lou Futterman was going up there escaping his creditors, and I was seeing these producers. Wow, rock and roll producer moved to Ithaca, New York. Why is that? Not realizing that he was just down on his luck. And he had Nugent's contract, and I had done some things musically. I had gotten a record deal, but then it was a three-piece band that I had called the Amateur Gynecologists, and
great name.
We got a $10,000 signing bonus, and we were going to have a party that night. And I was in charge of getting, supplies and things like that. And I came back to the house and found that the other two members had died because they had bought heroin and taken hot shots. And so it was kind of the end of that record deal. And it was pretty, daunting and things like that. And I was always the straightest person and most naive person you ever met.
Right.
Didn't do drugs, never did throughout my history. I never did drugs. I never drank. I was kind of like a Christian Scientist almost without the religion.
Well, I'll have to say, you and I are very similar in a lot of aspects. I don't drink. I've never done a drug, even when I was 13. It was not my gig. Just like skiing is not my gig.
Yeah.
And we have this great love for animals. I mean,
yeah.
It's funny when I tell people I don't drink, they go, "Oh, how long have you been sober?" And it's like,
right.
I'm not sober. I rather play tennis when I was 15.
Yeah. I wanted to be an ice hockey player.
Yeah, exactly. I want to play for the Habs. I mean, I grew up next to Ken Dryden. I want it to be him.
I was like, I was a huge Montreal Canadian fan myself.
Yeah.
But anyway, and later to the St. Louis Blues.
Brett
anyway,
Hull.
Yeah, no, but I was there in 67, 68, their first season, and the capture, when they lost to Montreal, and one of the thrills was watching the Stanley Cup, the 2 years against Montreal. But anyway, so my thing was, I wanted to get into the studio. I wanted to record my own stuff, and I became very close friends with Cliff Davies. He was the drummer, and he was a really talent behind Ted Nugent. As soon as Cliff was gone, Nugent's career went down the crapper. And Cliff basically arranged, he wasn't supposed to be the drummer. He had been a drummer in a band called If, and I had been working with him. And Cliff and I struck up a partnership, which later we went into doing some albums on our own. We formed a production company called Piranha Brothers, and we really had a good thing. Cliff was my mentor. And so Cliff got me into Nugent, got me doing all those things that I wasn't getting credited for. If you look at the single from Double Live Gonzo, I'm given the full producer credit. They used to go, well, you got a platinum album. And I was getting paid $225 a week. That's all I was getting. And I was just like, up until Scream Dream, which is the first one where I got full producer credit. I think, and or stated it was Scream. They all blend together to me.
At some
But
point, yeah.
so anyway, then I found myself. I became very good friends with the Scorpions. They brought me over to do an album in Germany that led to one thing that led to Poison. It's just all sort of a chain of events type of thing.
Yeah, it really is. So let me ask you this, because on your official website, the ricbrowde.com, it says after leaving Nugent, Browde was producing the debut Wasp album when the Scorpions brought him to Germany. Yada yada yada. He moved to the States, and despite having a reputation for being a garbage producer, had a string of hits. Now, why would you put that on your official website?
Well, that's what I was. I mean,
But what does that mean? Because it's funny.
I always got that. People would like the Poison album. We had a $23,000 budget to include everything: the mastering, the advances, the travel, the recordings, and things like that. And people would always like criticize me, like, here's a band that couldn't play their instruments for shit and couldn't sing, and yet the album sold 7 million copies. Yeah. But it doesn't sound as good as a Def Leppard album. Well, why? Because we didn't have the budget, and it sounded like garbage. And then Faster Pussycat, because of Poison, what happened with Faster Pussycat is the A&R guy wanted to sign them to a development deal, but he was going to give them $25,000. And I was like, for $25,000, I'll give you a bloody album. And he's like, you can't do that. I was going, I not only can, but I've done it. So he gave me $50,000 under the provision. What I didn't spend, I got to keep. Right. And so I got to keep $15,000. And that album sold I've been paid for over 1 million copies, even though it never was even certified gold because the label hated the band. But so I was doing all these low budget albums, and I was getting, and because you get stereotyped into whatever you have success with. And I had success with Nugent, who was, garbage music, basically. Poison, Faster Pussycat, I became known as a garbage producer. Then when I did Joan Jett, I did my first album with a budget, and that album went, I think, about 2 or 3 million copies sold. And then I started doing things that I really wanted to do, and they didn't sell crap. So it was, this is the tragedy of my life. The best albums I didn't sell, and the albums that I really had no respect for did pretty well.
All right, so I do want to take a couple of minutes, just real quick, on the Poison one, because I saw the video for whatever it was, Talk Dirty to Me, and I went down to the record store, and it was on sale on cassette for $5.99. I bought it, and I ended up loving it. And there is the story that, it was recorded in 2 weeks. And talk to me a little bit about that, because there are so many rumors on there that it wasn't really the guys that played on it, that you actually played drums on it, that Ricky would come in and you would just go, yeah, that sounds good, and then send them off, and then you would go replace all the drums.
Let's just say there was a lot of editing done on the album.
There was a lot of what?
Editing. The tape looked like zebra with all the splice marks. But we were able to do the album because of Stevie Nicks, to tell you the truth. She was so coked out. She had booked this studio called Music Grinder on Melrose Avenue in Los Angeles. And she was so coked out that she never showed up at the studio. So we made a backroom deal with the tape op, I think it was, at the shelf at the studio. And we got the studio for $500 cash a day. And if the fat bitch showed up, we'd have to be out. Well, she never showed up. We got her 2 weeks in and did the album. So that's basically the story.
So why do you think then that it spoke to so many people? Because I got it up here in Montreal, and
it was a triumph of image over substance, really. The songs were catchy. I mean, a lot of them were plagiarized. There were 3 lawsuits around that album for songs that were plagiarized from other bands. Really? But it was, the cool thing was the way I envisioned making records in those days
Right.
was nobody listened. I mean, Mutt Lange's the best producer probably of all time, but nobody really listens to production.
Right.
A&R people do, people with their suffering from rectal cranial inversion do. But, you know, it's just,
I might be one of those because I love great production. I love when it sounds sugary sweet. Give me Mutt
yeah,
Lange, give me Bob Ezrin, give me Bob Rock. I'll take the Black Album over anything Metallica has ever done, ever. Period.
you know, I mean, to me, all I listen to is old R&B and
Yeah.
gospel music from the black gospel music from the early 60s. So not, and I'm not religious, but I just love what I listened when I
Yeah.
listen to a record, I'm listening for the energy.
Yes.
And I'm not listening for, did the band speed up? Did the band slow down? You know, all those things that Pro Tools have sapped out of modern music,
Yeah.
I'm not listening to. I'm listening to, did it sound like the band was having fun and exciting? That's what translates over to audiences.
Yeah, you
It's
got to
just,
capture
you know,
vibe.
I
You need
mean,
vibe.
if Otis Redding came into, you know, brought a demo of Can't Turn Me Loose or something like that to an A&R guy today, they go, you sang sharp. You know, I and the band sped up. We need to fix this. And then he's like going, what the, you know, what the, you know, and that's what's missing from modern music. It all sounds machine produced and things
Mm-hmm.
like that. But I don't want to sound like my parents, you know, turn that shit lower because, you know, when I was playing the Kinks or as a kid, um, it's just today's music lacks soul because it's just overly processed. And what was cool about Poison, other than the fact that it opened up the music business where talent had previously been a barrier to entry, was that they were having fun. It sounded like in the studio. And that's what people were listening to. And then they did those great videos.
Yeah.
And we were very fortunate in that Capitol Records, who took over the label that Poison were recorded for, fired its entire A&R staff and had no albums in the pipeline except for Poison and Crowded House, which were the only two albums they had to work for 8 months. So both those albums went really well because the promotion staff had nothing else to do. So all the $100 handshakes to get DJs to play it across the country went to Poison and Crowded House. So boom, we were lucky. Right place, right time.
You were, and you know, Alan Niven, who used to work with Guns N' Roses and Great White, sometimes co-hosts the show with me, and he always tells me there's a perfection in the imperfection, and I think
Alan's a
that's
smart guy.
Alan's a very smart guy, and the vibe is important.
Yeah, I mean, we were sort of in the same circle though. We only met a couple times. Michael Wagner's the one who links us together. But
Yeah. Oh, I should have had Alan on here today. I should have told him. Oh well, next time.
Well, you know, it's quite funny because the girl who financed Guns N' Roses lives at my house right now.
Oh, you got Vicky there?
No, it's a woman named Laura Reinjohn, who's the first person thanked on the Guns N' Roses album.
Oh.
He's working as an S&M hooker, and they were all living at her house, and is the one who kind of financed the whole thing.
Good marketing, good PR. Let's put it that way.
Good on her.
Yeah.
Anyway, Poison, you know, Faster Pussycat, all those bands, they were having fun at what they did.
Yeah.
And nobody was, you know, the label would come in during Faster Pussycat's album and wanted to drop them, but they'd already given me the 50 grand, so they had to put it out anyway. After the album became a hit, they tried to kill the album. In fact, they called the A&R guy, said, have you dropped them yet? And he was like going, no, look, it broke in the charts at 79. And he's like going, fire them, drop them. And then the label president at the time, and then they went up another 10 points the next week. And he's like, did you drop them? And the guy thought he was safe because the album went up and he got fired for it. You know, it's amazing what happens when corporate America, the disconnect between corporate America and enthusiasm.
Yeah.
And real enthusiasm is hard to manufacture, and you can't teach cheekbones. And Poison had cheekbones. They were great, for that.
Listen, they were the perfect band for
For
the
that
scene
moment.
at that moment.
Yeah,
Absolutely. They had the
but
look, they had the enthusiasm, they had the willing fans. I mean,
that you trying to intellectualize why something's a hit is always a failure
yeah.
in my part. But they were in the right place at the right time. Good on them. I can't change it.
Nope.
Don't want to change it.
Nope.
Move on.
Move on. And the mystery will remain on whether or not you played drums on the album at all. Talk to me about the scene though, because you're involved with Victory, Kills for Thrills, Shooting Gallery, Jetboy, Rhino Bucket, all these bands that eventually end up being sort of the C-list or D-list bands. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. I mean, they're not playing arenas. They don't play Madison Square Garden. So, it is what it is. But it was an important underground scene, a sort of an underbubbling of what was going on in the major arenas.
Well, I mean, Victory was a German band.
True.
And they actually went on to become a platinum band in Europe.
Really? Okay.
After I left, but they did fairly well. Jetboy were a band that just were cursed by the fates. They should have been huge. One of the nicest people in rock and roll ever, Billy Rowe. They were great. They had Sammy Yaffa, who was a wonderful bass player and still is to this day.
Yep.
And they were on the wrong record label that dropped them, the same label that Faster Pussycat were on, actually.
Right.
And were dropped with the album that was pretty decent in the can that they'd done with Tom Allen down in Florida. They asked me to do one song. And I remember it was on my birthday that we did it at the record plant. It was a lot of fun. And that was it, and the album was released and did a lead balloon, but they were on MCA, which was then stood for Music Cemetery of America. So there wasn't much chance of success there. It's all about timing, all about marketing. And
actually, just give me a second here. Talk to me about MCA, because MCA has the reputation of the 80s bands and early 90s bands as being the place where your career went to die.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean,
it was just a poorly run label from top to bottom, except for the distribution arm was very good. But their A&R staff, nobody would sign with MCA unless they had to. They had no other choice.
Right.
And it was funny because Kill for Thrills actually was the exception for that. They had other places to go, but they took the money. Right. And therefore...
But they titled their album Commercial Suicide, so I think they knew.
They should have.
Right.
But, labels are only as good as the people that work with them.
Right.
And enthusiasm. With MCA, you never really... I was around a lot of labels because I produced for a bunch of labels.
Right.
You never got the idea that after the 9 to 5, or in the music business, probably noon to 7, probably day that they were going out to the clubs and hanging out and, just living the life of their bands and, and really supporting things. You never got that impression from MCA. Whereas, the people in the field at the,
Geffen, for example.
Geffen had way more creative people in their label, and that's probably why they were a successful label for the late 80s and early 90s. Polygram was actually the Mercury division of Polygram was really, really good at that. The people hung out, the people were on the streets, they were in touch with what was going on. I didn't get that vibe at MCA, and the only A&R guy there that was really sharp immediately left and went to Interscope. So, Michael Goldstone.
Is it fair to say that MCA was sort of a pop rap or whatever urban or whatever kind of label, and they sort of saw the rise of Quiet Riot and Bon Jovi and said, "Okay, we need a rock division," and then just they just
Every
didn't do any.
label,
They just
very few labels lead, they all
right,
follow,
right.
So, it's just like the movie business, oh, that was a hit. Like, get me 8 more just like it. And that was MCA's philosophy. So they'd sign Pretty Boy Floyd and garbage bands like that. And, because they saw, a band that kind of wore Poison's clothes. So, they must be good.
Though I gotta say, Leather Boys, or whatever you call it, that first album is endearing. It's good. It's cute. I mean, I like it.
Oh, cool.
I mean,
How many did it sell?
I have no idea, but I mean, I thought it was decent.
They're still out there trotting it. I mean, I think it sold enough copies that like Bret Michaels would probably have to unzip his pants to count how high it sold. But 11 maybe.
11, 12. Let me start wrapping up here because we said we do half an hour and we're already there. Believe it or not. Faster Pussycat. I saw them open up on the White Snakes tour in Montreal, and it was unfortunately one of the worst performances I'd seen. And then I spoke to the boys. I spoke to Brent Muscat like 10 years later, and he goes, "Oh, I remember that. I was having a tooth pulled, and there was this, and and there was too much coke, and there was too much this." Is that a band that should have done better? Because they sort of had the musical chops. I mean, Bathroom Wall and stuff was definitely a good enough song. What went wrong in the history of Faster Pussycat? Was it the band got in their own way, or was it just
No,
too late in
no.
the game?
I've, very few times do I think that a band would have done better had they stayed with me.
Right.
And they're the one that would. And it was funny because I was with Tammy yesterday, actually. Faster Pussycat got victimized by the label hated them as people. The label had a guy named Bob Krasnow had it in for them. Did not like them because they weren't arty and this, that. They were just street kids.
Yeah.
They got their album really easy. Really, they'd only done 6 gigs when I signed them. And, but they had an enduring quality to them. When I did them, I was a bit of a control freak on that first album because I didn't allow them, because I knew more than them, at that time. So I thought. And, we stayed at 3.5-minute songs by and large. Then they started doing albums where they were a little bit more in charge, and their arrangements got in the way. They were doing 6 and 7-minute songs, and that's not them. You got to be short, quick, verse, chorus, you're done.
Listen, I fully agree with you. I don't like self-indulgent songs.
And they got the best song that Faster Pussycat ever did was unreleased, and it's called "Lie Your Way to Heaven." And it would have been a huge hit. Probably would be today if they ever released it. And I couldn't believe when I heard, they showed it to me for their second album. I was like, this is awesome. And then I listened to their second album, which did well. I mean, You're So Vain for some reason was a hit, and I think it's atrocious. But I think if they had put "Fly Your Way to Heaven" on it, it would have been platinum single.
Really? Oh, I gotta hear that song now. I'm gonna have to reach out to Tammy somehow. Cause I mean, you look at "Don't Change That Song," Bathroom Wall. I'm looking at the thing here. A Bottle in Front of Me.
That one sucked. The last one. There's definitely a side 1 and a side 2 to that album. Bottle in Front of Me should have gone under the label.
Let me ask you that because I'm friends with Tom Werman, and he said that his trick for the bad song was he would put it before last on side B. You don't want to put it last because you don't want the fans to leave and go, "Man, that sucked," and then have that in their head. So he always snuck the worst song, according to him, before last. So track 9, for example.
Yeah.
Did you have a little trick like that where you just went, "Oh God, bottle in front of me is so
Nah,
fucking bad"?
I'm not as smart as Tom.
Okay.
No, Tom's deviously smart. I have nothing but respect for Tom, but Tom would be the one who probably sat there, figured it out, and did something like that. I just like, oh, I like this song better, and I like that song next, that song, and that's the way I would sequence an album.
Oh, that's great. Do you still have any desires if you know if Faster Pussycat did a reunion with Brent Muscat and everybody and said, "Hey Rick, let's go back to 1987 and do a reunion album." Would you be up for it, or are you like, "No, I'm on to dogs"?
I'm pretty much, I do mess around in Italy. I still do some stuff with some friends over there, and I did a really cool album a few years ago. With a band called Armed Venus. It's probably the best album I ever did, actually.
Okay.
Where they let me write all the stuff, and there's a song called "My Life Sucks, But My Girlfriend Doesn't," and "Jihad to See Her," and "Church of the Former Virgins." Really good album, amazing album. If you ever get your hands on it, you should. It's probably my best work as a producer.
Check it out.
It's between that, The Dogs d'Amour, and Flies on Fire were the best albums that I did. But, I would do something if I had control of it at this point in my life.
Right.
There's no desire to go into the studio, though. I mean, I far more enjoy writing. Not having to deal with, the great thing about doing the dog rescue and things like that is I tend to work with far better behaved and more housebroken
creatures
than I did with rock and roll. So not having to deal with egos is a wonderful thing.
That sounds great. And I'll last two quick things here. I see on the back there you've got a Hysteria Def Leppard, I guess, Platinum Award or something. What's the connection and how did you get that?
Well,
and
actually,
don't say eBay.
That one's my wife's, actually. Though Def Leppard were our opening act. My last tour with Ted Nugent was Scorpions and Def Leppard on their very first tour.
Oh, wow.
Very first tour of America. That one belongs to my wife, who is their attorney at Hologram.
Oh, okay. Well, look at that. And of course, your book, While I'm Dead, Feed the Dog, had great success. Talk to me just real quick about sort of the creative process. I mean, getting a band in like Faster or Poison creatively, you're doing different stuff. What was the process like to write a book, and how did that differ from sort of music creativity?
While I'm Dead was actually, what happened was my life revolves around my dogs.
Right.
And my dog got hit by a car and broke his leg and had to be on the ground, not moving for 4 weeks. And I borrowed, in those days, it was my, laptop computers were really expensive. And I borrowed my wife's thing to just sit on the floor with my dog, canceled all my recordings for 3 months and just said, I'm going to hang out with my dog. I'd be on the ground, so I'd be bored. The dog was sort of sedated to keep him quiet. And so I just sat there and I just started writing. And my wife would come home and say, "What'd you do all day?" And I'd show her this. And she's like very encouraged. She'd go, I think I wrote the first 25 pages in the first couple of days. And she's like, "You gotta write this." And so I finished it in a couple of months. And then the weird thing was, I wrote a book. Now, what the fuck do I do with it? Because I've never, ever written a book. And it's not like a demo where you can give it to somebody and they can, the next time they see you, they'll put it in their car and play it on their way over so they can say, "Oh yeah, I heard that." 3 minutes of their lives wasted while they were on the phone. Right. And so with the book, I printed up 20 copies and people would come over the house and say, "What have you been doing to it?" And I'd hand them that book and they'd go, "Oh," like sort of, "Yeah, I'm going to read it." And they, saunter off, never intending, but then they were going to see me again. So they go, "Ooh, I'm going to pick this up and just read a couple, just so I can just act like."
Sounds smart. That's right.
Sound smart with it. And they liked it. And what happened was one of the guys who was later president of Motown Records, and a wonderful person by the name of Steve McKeever, read it and loved it. And he got a couple of other people and read it and loved it. And they were all like, we got to make a movie, got to do this, got to do that. And so Polygram Records, the head of one of their divisions, was going to put it out. And they made me record a record to put it on because they're going, you're known for music. So do a record, do a soundtrack to your own book. And so I did that. And then the division got folded before the book came out. So, but they still liked, the guy who was in charge of it still liked it. So he had a friend of his put it out, and he went bankrupt the day the book came out. But it got into one bookstore in Los Angeles, and I got a phone call. It got in, and because it had the title was "While I'm Dead, Feed the Dog," which was a suicide note my mother left.
Right.
This guy from Germany picks it up, loves it, tracks me down through the phone book because I've always had a listed phone number. And he goes, are you the guy who wrote this? And he goes, well, I'm from Aufbau Verlag and I'm the president of it and I want to release it. I thought it was my friends from Berlin playing a trick on me. Didn't believe him, but gave him the rights. Then it got a deal at HarperCollins and England. Then I started getting chased by all these movie people, and then made the mistake of, after 5 years of being chased by everybody, taking a deal with somebody who then gang raped it into a movie. And then I had to make fun of the movie and start a blog about it. But it's I'm proud of the book, and there's a sequel that'll come out relatively soon once I get over just being so mortally offended with my with what got done to the movie. I just feel like the book, the continuation of the book is much blacker and much funnier. Yeah. But I just don't want it because they own the movie rights to it. I'm just trying to figure out a way to not have the movie rights attached to it. So.
Good. And for rock fans, it says here on your website, it says, While I'm Dead, Feed the Dog comes with a full-length CD soundtrack featuring members of Dog D'Amour. So, hey, bonus points right there.
Yeah.
That's great.
They're my family. Dogs D'Amour, basically. They're my closest friends on the planet.
Here we go.
And a group called Flies on Fire are really involved. Hey,
this is the latest rescue, by the way. Whoops. Let's see.
Well, I have 7 here, 7 dogs and 7 cats, and that's really cute.
That's the latest one, and he just stays in this lap all day long. It's been making interview doing difficult, but
you know, I can't. I have to isolate myself because I just have a herd, and you know. Yep. Tomorrow I'm flying out to go get 100 dogs, and you know, we've flown 60,000 pets since Wings of Rescue started, or we will have with tomorrow's flight.
So you fly them in from, are these the ones that come from dangerous places like Iraq, Iran?
We're flying some dogs from China this week, but normally we do all across North America, but these dogs are going to be coming from Texas. And going up to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and Seattle. But I've been in your neck of the woods. I mean, I just flew from the Bahamas to Halifax last week. And
wow. Well, if you ever have dogs and you're in the Montreal area that need a home, I'm always willing. And
hey,
we got some.
You know, we've flown into Quebec before, so you know it would not be the first time.
I will remind folks that wingsofrescue.org, wingsofrescue.org. Check it out. Make a donation if you can. There is a donate button there, always important. And on that, as we say in Montreal, merci, an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me stop that.